It was a blustery night in Chicago back in November of 2008. Barack Obama stating there are no red states or blue states, there's only the United States of America. 8 years and many gray hairs later, despite it all, that red state, blue state divide has grown, not shrunk. So, as the 44th President of the United States returns to his home city for his final major speech in office, we're asking, what could he have done differently? The list of new policies that his successor has vowed to unravel runs long, from banking regulation to Obamacare, from the Iran nuclear deal to the Paris climate change agreement. What will be left of Barack Obama's legacy? Expectations were always going to be high for the first black president, one who won the Nobel Peace Prize 1 year into his mandate. But even though he won't be remembered as the first post-racial president, he'll certainly argue in his speech that in his time in the White House, attitudes have changed. And same as the occupant of the highest office in the land comes to personify a nation's power and influence, we're going to ask if the most enduring legacy of Barack Obama's tenure, well, could be the man himself. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Obama's legacy. And with us from Chicago, France 24 correspondent Philip Crowther. Thanks for being with us. We welcome Ellen Kuntz, blogger of Obama à la carte. Mark Porter, president of the Paris chapter of Republicans Overseas, who will be in Washington on Inauguration Day.
That's right. Thank you.
In 2011, President Obama, speaking in the wake of Occupy Wall Street, called inequality the defining issue of our time. Well, we've invited Lucas Chancel. He's coordinator of the World Inequality Report at the Paris School of Economics. We'll be looking at how he's done on that score later on. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening.
The France 24 debate, where you can weigh in on Facebook and Twitter. The hashtag F24debate. Yes, it'll be in 9 days' time. Barack Obama will be retired from public service at the age of 55. Alexander Alcott looks back at the Obama years.
It was in Boston in 2004 that a young senator from Illinois delivered a speech that made him the breakout star of the Democratic Convention. It was with this message that he introduced himself to the nation.
There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
5 years later, Obama was just a few months into his presidency when he delivered a message of unity with the world's 1.5 billion Muslims.
America and Islam are not exclusive and need not be in competition. Instead, they overlap and share common principles.
With calls for unity a recurring theme, America's first black president rallied a new generation to the civil rights movement when he crossed an Alabama bridge where black rights activists had been beaten back 50 years earlier.
We know the march is not yet over. We know the race is not yet won. We know that reaching that blessed destination where we are judged, all of us, by the content of our character, requires admitting as much.
But just 3 months later, ongoing racial tensions were highlighted in a manner that shocked the nation. A white supremacist opened fire on the black congregation of a Methodist church in Charleston, South Carolina, killing 9 people. Here it was not only through speech, but also through song that the president sought to heal wounds.
Sing praise, how sweet the sound.
Barack Obama makes his final speech as president this Tuesday evening in an America that's been hugely divided by the latest election. The world will be listening to what he has to say to his successor 9 days before he hands over the torch.
And Philip Crowther in Chicago, where we'll go, I suppose we could say, full circle in just a few short hours. The inclusive message of Obama, how is it resonating?
here in Chicago rather well, because this is a city that votes for Barack Obama, voted for him in 2008, voted for him in 2012 as well, and this is also where his campaigns were based in both of those years, those two successful campaigns. And you can expect a lot of the former staffers, those who worked with intensity on those two campaigns, to actually be in that crowd later on tonight. It's going to be at McCormick Place. That's right next to Lake Michigan, and also right next to Grant Park. That is where Barack Obama celebrated his first mandate in the White House, his victory in 2008. You'll remember those scenes with those tens of thousands of people out there in the cold that evening. In terms of the content of what Barack Obama will be speaking about, well, this will be one of the biggest speeches, of course, of his presidency, the last one as well, and he'll, of course, come back and discuss what he believes are his biggest achievements, almost all of which are now in serious danger of getting undone by his successor in the White House, Donald Trump. Just take a look at the healthcare reform, for example, that he sees as his biggest domestic achievement. Foreign policy achievements, there are many in his eyes. The overtures toward Cuba, a new diplomatic relationship with Cuba, a nuclear deal with Iran, a climate change deal as well, all of which are also in danger. That is why he will be speaking to a crowd that is also rather scared right now of what a Trump administration might do, what it might undo, and what kind of divisions that have been made clear by this election might stay here in the United States. As you said, and as we saw in that report, this was supposed to be the inclusive president, but he leaves a very divided America behind.
Let's pick up on that, Philip, because I can clearly remember in 2008, people saying, yeah, they were harking back to when John F. Kennedy became the first Catholic president. And a few years later, being a Catholic president was no longer an issue. What about being the first African-American president?
It might not be, you know. There are potential candidates out there on the Democratic side, and there have been even on the Republican side. Others who might want to be in the White House, other African Americans who now believe that those borders no longer exist, that it is now possible to be President of the United States and be African American at the same time. This is also something that always weighed on U.S. President Obama, the fact that he was the first African American president, and that by many analysts he was being looked at as simply that, as the first black president, and how would he fare as the first black president. But he's always tried to distance himself from that a little bit, always wanted to be just one more president. He knew, of course, that was not the case, that he was going to be judged differently, and he has been judged differently, at least when it comes to race relations. A lot of people in the United States would have wanted him to improve race relations significantly. Not necessarily the case when you look at riots that have happened, shootings that have happened, and a clear racial divide there is in the United States right now when you look at which parties different races vote for, with white Americans largely voting for Republicans and black Americans largely voting for Democrats. So this is something that he will, of course, mention. He knows his place in history, but he's also often said that he just sees himself as just one chapter in the very long book about U.S. history and the history of U.S. presidents.
Ellen Kuntz.
Good evening.
Have those race relations improved?
Certainly over the long term, yes. I think that there have been clear marginal gains. I also believe that there have been gains for the wider African world and other African peoples throughout the world to have had this man in the White House for 8 years. So I'm convinced that the arc of history is still on the right path, despite the arrival of Mr. Trump. And I have to say, even just for myself, what a chance and a privilege it has been for the last 8 years to come to the media in France and speak about my super president, who was dignified and disciplined and had integrity. So I have to say that I'm extremely proud, despite all the other things that we can say about an Obama presidency.
Let me ask the Frenchman in the room here. Do French people perceive him as the African-American president or just as Barack Obama?
I mean, I think the French people perceive him as both. I mean, Barack Obama and the first African-American president, of course.
a bit of both. On that point, Mark Porter, could he have done more to bridge the racial divide that we've seen? And you heard our correspondent Philip Crowther say it. Blacks overwhelmingly vote Democrat, and whites, in their majority of them, vote Republican, and there is this divide.
I think that's quite sad, because I think that Obama's done nothing for the inner cities. They've only gotten worse. I don't think that Mr. Obama has actually done much for racial harmony at all. In fact, it's just the opposite. I'm quite glad that the process works in our country, that we can elect anyone that works very hard, and Mr. Obama certainly does, and he's certainly talented as a politician. But I think he's damaged the country quite a lot, which is why so many Americans are so angry right now, including the black community, including, well, all communities.
How is he personally damaged?
Well, if you look at Obamacare, for example, if you look at the housing crisis, if you look at unemployment, if you look at the illegal alien crisis, if you look crisis after crisis after crisis, and the terrorist crisis in Orlando, San Bernardino, and Detroit, we have this really big problem that
So you're putting all of the nation's problems at his doorstep.
He's the president, so this is something that we need a president to lead on these things. What could he have done that made things better? He could have reached out more to Republicans. One thing that we were quite disappointed with him is that he never reached out. He never even said one nice word in 8 years. So that was quite disappointing. During his first 2 years, of course, the Democrats controlled both the House and the Senate, and they had a lot of power. And we saw the abuses that were happening there, and that's, of course, why the Democrats got voted out after 2 years. After that, things, well, as we know, we've been on this show quite a lot. We've discussed a lot of these problems. And we are we're very hopeful that we can clean these problems up and begin and make America great again.
All right. We could talk about the separation of powers and who's to blame for the gridlock in Washington. Sure. But it is a criticism that's been leveled against Barack Obama that he didn't reach out enough, that he didn't court enough powerful lawmakers on Capitol Hill.
Yes, I appreciate Mark's comments, but at the same time, if I may, I think they reflect part of the post-truth environment that is happening right now, which is to say that Mitch McConnell, who was the minority leader at the time that Barack Obama took office, specifically said that he would do everything he could to make this man a one-term president. So he put party before his patriotism, and he was ready and willing to tank the United States than to have this man succeed. Barack Obama succeeded in many.
That's absolutely not true.
Well, this is welcome to the post-truth, Mark, if I may. Luckily, all of this is available online.
I don't know what post-truth means, and that's one thing we need to get rid of and just talk to each other.
Yes, absolutely.
And the more that we talk to each other, we can see what we have in common.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
And I think that behind the scenes, what's always a bit ironic is off the set, we're, people and Americans who can speak to each other. And I think the two share common goals and common concerns. Yeah.
But the polarization is real. On the hashtag F24 debate, here's one viewer saying the Obama legacy is Donald Trump. If Barack Obama wasn't Barack H. Obama wasn't the worst president in history, Trump wouldn't be getting sworn in next Friday. The worst president in history.
Well, I think that there are, we still have a very racialized America. And this idea of, post-racial or did, racial concerns go away? Certainly some things were brought to the fore, but other things were pushed in the background. Frustrations were left to fester. And now we're left effectively with a part of the electorate. It's called the flyover zone. I'm not lucky right now because I'm a person who was born in California and I grew up in New York. So I'm a coastal person. But the flyover zone of America was considered very left out. And if I may say, part of the white America that voted for Mr. Trump, voted like a minority bloc. They voted like a minority, extremely mobilized, very engaged, and quite a bit angry. So it's interesting to see how different demographic groups evolved over time.
This plays to one of the things we're talking about, which is his personality. Mm-hmm. His eloquence speaks to college graduates. Mm-hmm. But the no drama Obama persona, perhaps not so much to other people inside of the United States.
That's true, but I would take a note from First Lady Michelle Obama on that one, which is when they go low, we go high.
We've seen how that played out the last couple of weeks. How low can the Obamas go? That's pretty nasty what the Obamas have been saying about Mr. Trump after Mr. Obama promised to have a smooth transition. I'm quite proud, very proud to be a Republican right now, considering under McCain, under Romney, we were very graceful in conceding. Mr. Bush was very graceful. But frankly, the behavior of Democrats and Mr. and Mrs. Obama, well, not something to be proud of right now.
For me, extremely proud until the last day. And I would really task you to find exactly what you're talking about, because for me, this is part of the...
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're talking about either.
Well, this idea that Mr. Obama has done everything possible, the Democrats have tried everything possible to delegitimize Mr. Trump's presidency. The first week they came out with Mr. Comey, it was Mr. Comey's fault from the FBI that Hillary didn't win. Then it was the idea that it was the Russians hacking, that was the cause of this. This idea, then the recount, which actually came up with more votes for Mr. Trump after the recount.
Barack Obama hasn't said anything.
But he did say, absolutely he did.
You're going to have to find
that
it,
when he came out and said that Mr. Trump should behave himself and that these ideas he's pushing forward in terms of the Russian hacking and these things.
Yes, well, those ideas are extremely serious, Mark, because the problem is we could be looking at the end of our democracy as we know it. Just that. Someone who is literally in bed with and a puppet of the Russian government is extraordinarily dangerous.
It's not true. And exactly there, that's exactly the point that I wanted to make, that divides America and is not very healthy for our democracy.
We're going to look at the Obama years a little bit more after the break. We'll look more at the Trump years tomorrow when he gives his first big press conference. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24
If he will honor the press
debate.
conference and say actual words and not treat.